You are Locked On Wolverines, your daily podcast on the Michigan Wolverines, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Three times today I will say happy Thursday. I've already said it once. We're saying it again. Locked On Wolverines podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it is kind of your team every day. I mean, the network is. Locked On Wolverines hasn't quite been that way. I'll explain in segment 3 just kind of what's been going on with me, why we're being very intermittent. But it's nothing groundbreaking, but I think that y'all deserve at least an explanation. But nonetheless, we are going to get to that. I want to start off with, and we're going to see how long this is going to carry me. It might carry me into 2 segments. If not, we'll bridge off of this. But I want to address this. I really have a ton of respect for Mike Farrell, formerly of Rivals. I think that he is a consummate professional. He's been very helpful to me. I like to aggregate a lot of things that he did when he was at Rivals. But he put out a list of, and at first he put it out, and then he revised it, and then he revised it again. A list, and it makes me wonder if it was because he just for some reason forgot about Michigan and then revised it, and then was like, you know what, this is going to be good for attention. But he did a top 5 teams in the Big Ten, and going into 2022, and I don't have it in front of me, but it was these 5 teams in some kind of order, and I think it was, if I'm not mistaken, I very well might be, it was 5 Iowa, 4 Michigan State, 3 Purdue, 2 Wisconsin, number 1 Ohio State. Glaring omission is your Big Ten champion, defending champion, Michigan. And I think that is insane. Absolutely insane. And what continues to be insane is that he doubled down on it on Thursday, on today, as I'm speaking here, by doing a quick YouTube in which he defended it and said, I just don't think Michigan is that good. Okay, fine, fair. He's like, I think Michigan State is a better team. And if you want to say it's because, Michigan lost a lot on defense, okay, well, Michigan State lost a ton too. Transfer portal, graduation, no more Kenneth Walker. One of the 2 receivers is gone. Stuff like that. Iowa has no offense. And he's like, and then he comes out and says Aiden O'Connell is the real deal for Purdue. Okay, but he doesn't have David Bell. They don't have George Karlaftis. Wisconsin, I can make a case for, okay, maybe they're better than Michigan. I mean, they got shellacked when they played Michigan last year. Granted, the 3 players that did the most damage defensively are the 3 that are notably departed. And Ohio State, I mean, I can understand if you're going to say Ohio State is still the king of the mountain. Doesn't matter if they got knocked off for 1 year. This is still the team to beat. It still defies belief that you would look at this Michigan team, which returns the bulk of the offense and still has a lot of really good defensive pieces. This isn't a Michigan team that has a defense in which you're going to be relying primarily on freshmen and sophomores. Are there going to be freshmen and sophomores involved? Absolutely. Junior Colson, a sophomore. He's certainly going to be involved. You look at guys like Mason Graham that could be involved. Freshman. Rayshawn Benny could be involved. Sophomore. Kenneth Grant when he arrives on campus certainly could be involved in the defense. But for all of those types, you still have Taylor Upshaw, who's in his 5th year with the program. Mike Morris, who's in his, 4th year with the program. Jalen Harrell, who's in his 3rd year with the program. Nikai Hill-Green, R.J. Moten, 3rd years. DJ Turner, 4th year. Jamon Green, 5th year. Right? You've got a lot of guys who have been around and have played at a high level that they were counted on last year, and they're going to be playing in the same defensive scheme, even though they have a new coordinator. And we've seen, even just with the corners, the types of strides that they've made now that they've had a year under Steve Clinkscale. You feel like those linebackers, as much as that's still kind of a question mark for me, you feel good about Junior Colson. You feel a lot better about Nikai Hill-Green. guys are allowed to make improvements, right? And I think that's one of those weird things that sometimes it's like, well, we saw that Michigan defense, and it seemed like maybe some of these guys weren't that good, that the ones that are going to be counted on and relied upon. Okay, well, guys are allowed to make improvements. And offensively, you can sit there and say, well, they lost Hassan Haskins, and he's the one who really buried Ohio State. Well, Blake Corum was the guy until he got hurt, So, and then you have Donovan Edwards, and who is the guy waiting in the wings. Like I said to you before, Joel Klatt pointed to me when I was on the sidelines before the Wisconsin game and just was like, pointed to me and then pointed to Donovan Edwards and said, that guy is going to be so good. So good. I'm like, yeah, I know. I watched him in high school. So it's funny to me, just like kind of the narratives that end up happening with Michigan, because it doesn't seem like Wisconsin's getting that love. And I actually am equally kind of annoyed that Penn State got omitted from that, right? Like Penn State loses, they lose a couple pieces, but like they don't lose a ton. They bring back Sean Clifford. I think the bigger thing is losing Brent Pry as a defensive coordinator, but Manny Diaz is a really good coach. Penn State, let's not overthink it, right? The top 5 in the Big Ten Conference in 2022 will almost certainly look like some mix of Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, Wisconsin, and then either Iowa or Michigan State. Let's just be fair about it. Let's not overthink it. But those 4 that I mentioned are most likely going to be in that conversation. And then it's going to be up to some of those others, Iowa, Purdue, Michigan State, what they do. Could they be up, 1, 2, or 3 by the end? Absolutely. I'm not saying that they're automatically number 5, but those other 4, the ones that we always look at and say, those are the teams that are going to be really good on a yearly basis in the Big Ten, chances are that's going to be the case. Michigan's offense should be beyond explosive. It should be absolutely incredible, right? Because they bring back almost everybody. They bring back every receiver. They add 3 amazing freshmen. They bring back Ronnie Bell, who got injured in the season opener. If Ronnie Bell was healthy last year, that offense would have been even more explosive, right? They've got the running backs. They've got the offensive line. They've got the tight ends. I think the defense will still be, it might not be top 10, but it will certainly be top 3rd of college football. And that's what all they really need to be, especially with the offensive pieces they have. So I do have more thoughts. Hence, we are going to continue talking about this in segment 2, and then we will get to the why I'm intermittent. And it probably deserves a whole episode. I've done a whole episode on it a while ago, before video, all of that kind of stuff, and you can look it up. We'll talk about that here momentarily, but before we do, all right, listen, BetOnline.net is your number 1 source for all your betting stats and sports info. Find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs and the start of Major League Baseball season. BetOnline is your continued source for all your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, I am as fired up as I thought I was going to be over all of this conversation here about Mike Farrell's thing. I feel like, it's being edgy for the sake of being edgy. I understand that they lose Aiden Hutchinson, who we projected was going to be really good going into the season. David Ojabo, no one projected the level that he ended up playing at. Right? No one would have sat there and told you David Ojabo is going to be one of your main guys. That wasn't happening. Daxton Hill, yeah. But they still got a lot of really good defensive pieces. But my big thing is not the question marks, but it's just the fact that this has been kind of an on-running thing, I feel like, this offseason. It is that usually, college football, and we've talked about this plenty of times on the show before, but college football media tends to have a very short memory when it comes to the teams that are good and the teams that aren't, right? And there's certainly exceptions. But like when a team is good in 1 year, we act like they're going to be good forever now, right? Like this is the team to beat. Look no further than like Cincinnati at this point, right? Like I don't know. I'm going to look here while we're on air, but I would bet that like PFF had a too early top 25. I would bet you that Cincinnati's on that list, even though they lose Desmond Ridder and they lose a bunch of other key pieces, right? But that's the way that we tend to operate. Is the teams that are good are going to be good forever, and the teams that are bad are going to be bad forever. And like I said, there's some exceptions. There's teams like USC and Texas, which always get the benefit of the doubt for whatever reason. Michigan a lot of times has been that, but for some reason, Michigan also is kind of on the corollary of that. And that was like when Mike Farrell went on to YouTube to defend it. He said, listen, Michigan has a tendency, a history. All right, well, the history overall is one of winning. The last, I don't want to say 10 years, but 2007 through 2014, not great. And then 2015 through this last year, pretty good to what ended up being great, with the exception of 2020, which was not good. But like Michigan wasn't on any, like Michigan was bad in 2020, and they were thought to be bad going into this next year. And this last year, and then they ended up being really good, obviously, ended up winning the Big Ten, going to the college football playoff. Pro Football Focus has their top 25. They have Michigan as number 5. I think that's fair. They have Ohio State as number 2. I think that's also fair. Clemson at number 4, maybe. We'll see. But then, like USC at 8. Like, I understand. They have Lincoln Riley. They bring in Caleb Williams. They're going to be better, but I still don't necessarily think that they're, like, going to be, like, incredible, automatically. But here, again, the thought of teams that were good last year are probably going to be good forever. Wake Forest, they have it number 10. And I understand they're saying Sam Hartman's back at quarterback. Cool. Texas is 14. Team that was bad last year, but all of a sudden you're like, yeah, they're going to be good because they're Texas. That's what they do. Actually, no Cincinnati on the list. They just missed the cut, as did Michigan State. But Michigan doesn't get this type of... I say that also understanding that on this list, Michigan is number 5. But generally speaking, for whatever reason, like you get this with Michigan with like Mike Farrell saying Michigan's not a top 5 team in the Big Ten. Number one, I look at their schedule and say there's no way that they're not going to be. They have the easiest cupcake of a non-conferences you could possibly have. They're going to tiptoe right through that, assuming they get past Maryland. If they don't, that's pretty much a disaster. We'll see how they do at Iowa. Then they've got, some of the other teams that they should beat before. They've got Penn State and Michigan State at home. And you finish out at Ohio State. Like, if Michigan's 10-3, once everything's said and done, that's fine. I mean, not fine. That makes sense. That you can't really begrudge them that because you still have to play some good teams. But ultimately, with what Michigan has, it should be 11-0 going into that Ohio State game. It probably won't be. Probably it'll be 10-1. But nonetheless, I think that's if they're 10-1 going into Ohio State, there's no way that they're not a top 5 team. And you can sit there and say, like Mike Farrell did, Michigan State's a better, I think they're a better team. Okay, well, Michigan State, at least I know transitive property isn't exactly the be-all, end-all. Michigan State didn't look like it could compete with Ohio State, whereas Michigan trounced them. And you can say, well, Michigan State beat Michigan head-to-head. I mean, if you watched that game, you know how it went, right? Like, you can't convince me that Michigan State was the better team last year. That said, sometimes the team that isn't better wins. I've brought this up a billion times. 2011, Michigan versus Notre Dame. I have no problem telling you Notre Dame was the better team. But Notre Dame let up just enough. Michigan found just enough ways to win, and they won. I think last year Michigan was the better team than Ohio State based off of the way that they played head-to-head. Will they be the better team in 2022? We'll find out. Could Michigan State be the better team in 2022? We'll find out. But, like, this is still a roster that, like, you can sit there and say, well, Iowa. Yeah, Iowa's up there. Their defense with no offense. Michigan still is a roster filled with at least mostly 4 stars. Handful of 5 stars. Not nearly as many because they just lost Chris Hinton, Daxton Hill. They're losing at worst, number 2 pick in the NFL and Aiden Hutchinson. But this is still like a team that is got stacked talent. And they don't get that benefit of the doubt for whatever reason. Wisconsin. I understand the Wisconsin hype. They finished out mostly strong, save for a loss near the end of the season there to Minnesota, or at the end of the season to Minnesota. Right? They finished really strong, and they finally got Braylon Allen going. Graham Mertz was making less mistakes. I get it. But for some reason, Michigan seems exempt from this rule of, you had a good season, we expect you to continue that momentum. I just find it odd because we've talked about it a lot in preseasons of how that tends to be a thing. College football media with short memories. Not looking at what the rosters are, and just like Northwestern coming off of I told you going into last season, Northwestern was going to be terrible, but they were a top 25 team, and everyone's like, oh, they're going to be really good. I'm like, how? They lost everybody. You don't know what they're going to be. At least with this Michigan team, you could look at the offense and say, all right, this offense is going to be really good. All right. That's going to do it for me talking about that, because I almost feel I'm borderline rambling because I'm so incoherent due to my, I don't want to, it's not rage, it's just confusion over all of this. I don't get it. All right, listen, this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts stores to stock all the parts you need while endure often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning, and wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the brand that their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money while using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, or 100% more for the same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Rock Auto's prices are reliably low from every customer. So go explore their easy-to-use website today. Find the solution to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now. See all the parts available for your car or truck. Right locked on in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, we're going to deviate from our normal what have you about us talking about Michigan sports and all of that. I'm going to get a little serious on you for a minute, but not like super serious. I mean, kind of serious. I don't know what it is. As all of you know, that my grandfather, who meant the world to me, he passed away in February, and we all have different ways that we deal with grief, and we all have different ways that we just show up. You know what I mean? And I had been preparing for the possibility of his passing for a very long time, knowing quick tangent. My ex-girlfriend, my first real girlfriend, died of a heroin overdose back in 2001, and she had warned me that that she was not long for the earth. Not well before, but before she ultimately passed. Ever since she did, I always thought, I need to start preparing myself for his passing, so that I'm not, because it was like, who means the most to you in the world? And it was my grandfather. And like I've said before, he was a Michigan man. I'll always remember being at South in Santa Monica. It was the Michigan Alumni Watch location for Los Angeles that year. And we're watching the Michigan State game in 2009. And he turns to me and says, when I was at Michigan, Fritz Chrysler was the coach. So, but I mean, he was my world. I went to Michigan because of him. My love for the university was stemmed from him. The way and person that I am stemmed from him. But when he passed, I was just numb. And as I was planning on going back down to Florida to see my grandmother, it didn't work out. But I was trying to get, because as I've said on the show before, I don't like to fly. It's like an involuntary tick that happens when I'm flying. It's not like, oh, I just don't like this. It's a panic attack. It's an anxious reaction that I seem to have no control over. So I was like, you know what? I've read books to try to learn how to get over it. I've tried to do different exercises. Some have gone well, some haven't gone well. I was going to be flying down with somebody who I flew down with before. And I'm like, you know what? I don't want to put you through that, dealing with my anxiety and, me hyperventilating, all the kinds of stuff that happened. So I reached out to like a telehealth deal to be like, I'm just going to get some anxiety medication. And they were like, I had filled out a questionnaire and then talked to them for a bit. And they were like, you have full-blown depression, right? As news to me. And it made sense because with depression, doing the littlest thing sometimes can feel like the biggest chore. Getting out of bed, even for me on a normal day, has become a chore. And I know a big part of it is, there's the seasonal aspect here in Michigan, not getting the vitamin D and different things of that nature. But of course, losing my world and my grandfather plays another part of it. And burnout from the season. There's certainly a lot of reasons why, but I've done as much as I can to get help, figure out what to do to make myself better. I have good days, I have bad days. I might wake up in the morning and be all like, all right, I'm going to do a podcast today, and then I sit down here and clam up and go back and lay down. It's a process. The reason why I wanted to bring it up, obviously, is to let you know why I'm so intermittent. It's not like other times where it's like I don't have anything to talk about. Certainly, we've had things to talk about, spring football, and yet here I was not talking about it. As I start to feel like I'm seeing a light on the other end of the other end of the tunnel, I feel like I owe you that explanation. But also just to say, like, hey, if you're someone that's struggling with depression and you need, help, go out and find it. Whatever it is, if it's, for me, it's been a lot of reading books and talking to the people who care about me, talking to, my girl, or talking to Jake Butt, or talking to my best friend, or whatever, whoever. That's been helpful. But reading books and learning different things from a psychological aspect. If you want to talk to a therapist, do that. I'm also taking a very mild antidepressant, which I haven't necessarily noticed anything from it, but that's where we're at. But don't let the stigma of it bother you. And like I said, we did a whole show on mental health. We did a whole thing. It was in 2019, summer of 2019. I'll link it in the in whatever bio here. Link in bio. It's not really a bio, right? In the description, I'll link it. But we did it. We talked to Rachel Barbo, and we talked to Will Heininger, former Michigan defensive end, about mental health. So certainly I've dealt with depression on and off throughout my life. I don't think it's ever been as debilitating as it's been for me this spring. But I owed you guys the explanation. You don't have to reach out and say, hey man, or whatever. Like, I'm not saying any of this to get your pity. But I do owe you an explanation why we're very intermittent on these podcasts. I told Zach Blackerby, who runs our college podcast, hey, I'm coming through the other end here finally, and he's been very supportive, and he's let me know that I don't necessarily need to be as on this as I need to, as long as I take care of myself. So I've done as much as I can to take care of myself in these moments so that I can be better, so that I can return to doing this every day and have it not be the struggle that it has been. I'm sure that you've noticed that some of the episodes that I've done have been a huge struggle. It's been very difficult to find something to talk about, as easy as it might be to talk about. So that's it. That's all I got. So yeah, 3 podcasts on Thursday today. So if you've listened to this one and hadn't listened to the other 2, there's the Jake Butt spring game episode that we finally sat down and talked about it. And one I haven't recorded as of right now, which will also be out, is the mailbag that was supposed to go last week. So definitely make sure you check those out. We're tripling up since didn't get on anything. But anyway, thank you for watching and or listening. I appreciate you letting me also be vulnerable with you for a moment. It's not something I'm terribly afraid to do. I guess that makes it not a vulnerability, but no, I'm not afraid to say what I'm thinking, feeling, and that's everything that I preach when it comes to the way that I cover this team is kind of how I treat life. So anyway, thank you anyways. Appreciate you. We'll talk to you soon. Peace.